The first thing you should know about our species is that we are terrible at following rules. The second thing is that we are excellent at holding grudges. Put those two qualities together, and you have got the perfect recipe for what the humans might call catastrophic innovation. But I'm getting ahead of myself. Let me back up. My name is Zor'Tak, Senior Engineer of the Vex'Tari Science Division, and until recently, nobody in the Galactic Council gave a single quantum fluctuation about our little corner of the Andromeda Galaxy. We were the cosmic equivalent of that weird neighbor who collects bottle caps and talks to their plants. Harmless, quirky, easily ignored. Your application for advanced propulsion technology has been denied, announced Council Representative Drar, a gelatinous blob with 17 eye stalks that somehow all managed to look down on me simultaneously that I stood before the Grand Chamber, my forearms crossed in what I hope conveyed extreme displeasure rather than nervous fidgeting. The cavernous room hummed with the quiet conversations of 200 different species, most of whom were pretending not to eavesdrop on our humiliation. On what grounds? I asked, my voice modulator carefully calibrated to hide the fact that I wanted to liquefy Drunar with our experimental and highly illegal particle beam. We have met every requirement in your ridiculous 12,000-page application. Drunar's central mass rippled in what passes for laughter among the Narluvians. Section 7, paragraph 9294 clearly states that any developing species must demonstrate mature responsibility before accessing Class 3 technology. Your recent weaponization of pocket dimensions suggests otherwise. That was an accident, protested my colleague Picare from behind me. How were we supposed to know that folding space-time would create a temporary black hole? Besides, that moon was uninhabited. It was uninhabited, corrected Drunar, because it was a sacred meditation retreat that had been temporarily evacuated for seasonal cleansing rituals. The Zor'Gathians are still finding pieces of their monuments in neighboring star systems. I waved all four hands dismissively. Details, details. We have learned our lesson. No more unsupervised dimension folding. Your application is denied, Drunar repeated, each eye stalk blinking in sequence like some grotesque binary countdown. The Council recommends you focus on developing your own technological solutions rather than seeking shortcuts. Perhaps in another century or two, we will reconsider. The chamber doors opened behind us with a dramatic whoosh that I'm certain was programmed specifically to emphasize our walk of shame. This isn't over, I muttered as we exited, careful to keep my voice low enough that only Picare could hear. Of course it isn't, she agreed, her cranial ridges flushing a dangerous shade of orange. But what exactly are we going to do about it? We are centuries behind most council races. I smiled, revealing rows of perfectly symmetrical teeth, a cosmetic modification I'd gotten specifically because it unnerved most carbon-based life forms. We're going to take the Council's advice. We're going to innovate. The journey back to Vex'Tari Prime took 14 standard cycles, which gave me plenty of time to stew in righteous indignation and develop what Picare called an unnecessarily elaborate revenge scheme. I called it strategic technological advancement with bonus humiliation factors. So let me get this straight, said Picare as our ship approached the swirling purple atmosphere of our homeworld. Instead of simply developing our own propulsion technology, which would take decades but eventually get us what we want, you propose we create an entirely new form of technology that the Council hasn't regulated yet, something so strange they won't know how to categorize it, and use that to, what exactly? To make them look stupid, I said, checking our descent trajectory, and to get where we need to go without their precious approval. That sounds like significantly more work. Yes, but will be much more satisfying, I replied. Also, I already have an idea. The landing bay of the Science Division headquarters was nearly empty when we arrived. Budget cuts had reduced our once proud organization to a skeleton crew of the brilliant, the desperate, and the criminally unmarketable. Perfect for my purposes. Director Calvan was waiting for us, his exoskeleton polished to a high shine that indicated he was extremely stressed. Calvan only cleaned his carapace when preparing for a catastrophe. I assume from your early return and the lack of celebratory toxins that the Council was unreceptive, he asked, mandibles clicking anxiously. They suggested we focus on our own technological solutions, I said, striding past him toward the laboratory complex. So, total rejection then, Calvan sighed, scuttling after us. I was afraid of that. The Oversight Committee wants a full report, and they're talking about further funding reductions. Tell them we are pursuing an innovative new direction that will revolutionize intergalactic transport, I said, punching in my access code to the main lab. Are we? Asked Calvan. We will be as soon as I convene the team. I turned to face him, all four of my arms spread in what our species recognizes as absolute confidence. Director, I need your complete trust and approximately 87% of our remaining budget. Calvan's compound eyes register alarm. That's most of our operating funds. Do you want to keep scraping by on council handouts? Or do you want to make Vex'Tari Prime a name that causes Druin AR's eye stalks to twitch uncontrollably? After a brief silence, Calvan's mandibles relaxed. I've always hated that gelatinous snob. You have your budget. Just don't make me regret this more than I already do. 3 standard months later, our lab had transformed from an orderly research facility into what looked like the aftermath of a collision between a junk dealer's warehouse and a quantum computing center. Pieces of half-dismantled technology littered every surface. Holographic equations floated in the air, some of them pulsing angry red to indicate mathematical impossibilities, and my core team consisted of the division's most brilliant misfits. Picare, our theoretical physicist whose theories were considered unnecessarily creative by mainstream science. Zumbar, a neurological engineer who had once tried to telepathically connect with his own digestive bacteria, just to see what they were thinking. And Nextly, a programming prodigy who had been banned from 6 different virtual reality networks for creating what she called entirely harmless reality-bending anomalies. I still don't understand what we are building, complained Zumbar, looking up from a tangle of neural interfaces. You keep saying it's not a propulsion system, but then you keep talking about moving through space. We are not building a propulsion system, I confirmed, adjusting the calibration on what appeared to be a helmet made of scavenged parts and glowing crystalline structures. We are building a perception engine. A what? Asked Nextly, her digits flying across multiple holographic interfaces. The Council regulations prohibit unauthorized development of technology that physically moves us through space faster than our current capabilities, I explained for what felt like the 1,000th time. But they say nothing about technology that alters our perception of space-time itself. Because that's not how travel works, said Picare, though her tone held more curiosity than criticism. Isn't it? I challenged. What is distance but a perception? What is time but an agreed-upon illusion? The Council races have locked themselves into thinking about travel as moving physical matter from point A to point B. But what if we could simply redefine the relationship between points A and B? That's not science, said Zumbar. That's philosophy with extra wiring. And yet, I gestured to the pulsing equations surrounding us. The math suggests it's possible. We have all seen the preliminary tests. The spatial displacement effect is real. The spatial displacement effect was our deliberately vague term for what had happened during our first prototype test, when Nextly had briefly experienced being in 2 places simultaneously, both in our lab and somehow inside the cafeteria storage unit. She'd returned with a dessert packet she definitely hadn't been carrying before, along with a migraine that lasted 3 days and a new appreciation for existential dread. The effect is real, agreed Picare cautiously, but uncontrolled, potentially dangerous, and completely theoretical as a means of actual transport, which is exactly why the Council would never think to regulate it, I said with a smile. Now, who wants to help me with the final calibrations on the Mark 7 prototype? Zumbar raised a tentacle. Will this one also smell like burning mathematics? Because the Mark 6 gave me nightmares about infinitely recursive equations. Probably, I admitted, but think of the glory when we succeed. I'd rather think about surviving, muttered Nextly. But I'm in. This beats programming entertainment modules for tourist facilities. The Mark 7 prototype looked deceptively simple. A helmet-like device connected to a control console, bristling with both analog and quantum interfaces. What made it revolutionary, potentially, was the crystalline matrix suspended inside the helmet, designed to create what we had begun calling a perceptual bridge between distant points in space-time. The theory was complex, but the principle was almost embarrassingly straightforward. If consciousness could be entangled with itself across space, the physical body might follow, not by traditional movement, but by a sort of reality adjustment where the universe reconfigured itself to match the new perceptual framework. This is either the stupidest or most brilliant thing we have ever attempted, said Pic-RA as we prepared for the first full test. Possibly both simultaneously, which seems fitting. Director Calvan had joined us, his carapace now polished to a mirror finish, a sign of impending institutional catastrophe. The Oversight Committee is demanding results. 3 months of funding with nothing to show except Zumbar's new collection of existential phobias isn't exactly impressive. Today we make history, I assured him, making final adjustments to the helmet. Today we demonstrate that the Vex'Tari don't need council approval to revolutionize space travel. Today we potentially scatter our atoms across multiple planes of existence, added Nexley helpfully. Who's making the attempt? Asked Calvan, eyeing the helmet with undisguised concern. All 4 of my arms raised simultaneously. I designed it. I will test it. That's unexpectedly noble of you, said Zumbar. I shrugged. Noble nothing. If this works, I want the first observer advantage when we present our findings. Also, I have made certain modifications to my neural chemistry that should help stabilize the perceptual shift. You have been experimenting on yourself again, Pic-RA said flatly. It wasn't a question. Only marginally illegal self-modification, I assured her, settling the helmet onto my cranial ridge, within acceptable parameters of recklessness. The lab's lighting dimmed as power diverted to the prototype. The crystalline matrix began to glow with an unsettling purple light that seemed to bend in ways light absolutely should not. Target coordinates are set for the auxiliary storage facility across the complex, reported Nexley. Simple, short-range jump for the first test. Power at 60% and stable. I closed my eyes, focusing on the mental exercises we developed to facilitate the perceptual bridge. Initiating primary sequence in 3, 2, 1. The sensation was indescribable. Imagine your consciousness being simultaneously stretched and compressed, as if reality itself was an elastic membrane being folded around you. Colors that had no business existing in our visual spectrum flashed through my mind. I had the distinct impression that I was being observed by something vast and mathematical that found our experiment amusing in a coldly abstract way. Then, with a sensation like the universe hiccuping, everything stabilized. I opened my eyes to find myself standing in the auxiliary storage facility, exactly as planned. The helmet was still on my head, the control interface still clutched in my upper arms. It worked, I shouted, knowing the communication link would relay my voice back to the lab. Perfect spatial transition, no physical discomfort, no loss of equipment and weight. Something was wrong. The storage facility looked different, brighter, somehow, with equipment I didn't recognize lining the walls. And there was a strange humming sound that seemed to be coming from everywhere at once. Zor'Tak, your vital signs are fluctuating, came Pic-RA's concerned voice through the comm link. What's happening? I'm not sure, I admitted, turning slowly to take in my surroundings. I'm in a storage facility, but it doesn't look like ours. Everything's too new. That's when I noticed the window, a window that absolutely should not have existed in a subterranean storage room. Through it, I could see a skyline of gleaming spires that definitely weren't part of our research complex. Pic-RA, I said carefully, I don't think I'm in the auxiliary storage facility. At least, not our auxiliary storage facility. What do you mean? The coordinates were exact. I replied, moving toward the window for a better look, that either our storage facility has been dramatically renovated without anyone telling us, relocated to the capital city, and moved above ground, or I'm somewhere else entirely. That's not possible, said Nexley, her voice joining the communication. The perceptual bridge doesn't have enough power to send you that far. The mathematics don't allow for it. I was about to respond when the door behind me slid open with a soft hiss. I turned to find myself face to face with myself. Well, not exactly myself. The being in the doorway had my general physiological structure, but with subtle differences, smoother skin, more refined cranial ridges, and eyes that glowed with an internal light that our species definitely didn't naturally possess. Fascinating, said my not-quite doppelganger. The temporal perception bridge actually worked. Hello, ancestor. Back in our lab, chaos had erupted. According to Picaret's frantic explanation through my communication link, my vital signs had briefly flatlined before re-establishing at an altered frequency. The power draw had exceeded all projected parameters, and 3 secondary systems had overloaded. We need to pull you back immediately, she insisted. Whatever you are experiencing, it's not part of the test parameters. Wait, I said, staring at my evolved counterpart. I think I have jumped forward in time, not just space. Approximately 273 cycles forward, confirmed the future Vex'Tari. I am Dr. Zor'Tak Ven, quantum historian. You would be my great-great ancestor, the infamous engineer Zor'Tak, who pioneered perceptual displacement technology. Infamous. I couldn't help but feel a surge of pride. So it works? The technology becomes viable. More than viable, said Dr. Van with a gesture that encompassed the gleaming city outside. It revolutionized our civilization, though not quite in the way you intended. Zor'Tak, your neural patterns are destabilizing. Interrupted Zoom bar through the comm. Whatever conversation you're having needs to wait. We are initiating emergency recall. Just a moment longer, I pleaded, then addressed my descendant. What do you mean? Not in the way I intended. Did we show the council? Did we make AR's eye stalks twitch? Dr. Vin made a gesture that I didn't recognize, some future evolution of our body language. The council no longer factors into our considerations. Your discovery led to something far more significant than interstellar travel. It opened the gateway to perception-based reality manipulation. As she spoke, the room around us flickered, briefly revealing different environments. A lush garden, a sterile laboratory, a swirling vortex of energy before settling back into the storage facility appearance. You are changing the room, I observed, fascinated despite the growing pain behind my eyes. I'm adjusting my perception of it, and the universe accommodates, corrected Dr. Venerable. Your prototype was crude, focusing only on spatial displacement. Later generations understood that the technology could alter not just where we were, but what we experienced, and eventually, reality itself. Zor'Tak, Picaret's voice had risen to an alarming pitch. Your physical form is showing quantum instability. We are losing coherence. I felt it too, a strange sensation of becoming less solid, as if my very atoms were considering other possible arrangements. The council, I persisted, even as the room began to waver around me. What happened when they discovered what we'd built? Dr. Ven's expression turned solemn. They tried to stop us, of course. Called our technology aeriality terrorism. But how do you stop a species that can literally think themselves out of your prison dimensions? How do you negotiate with beings who can perceive your weapons as flowers? The implications hit me like a gravity wave. We went to war with the council. Not war. Something far more terrifying to them. My descendant smiled, revealing teeth that glowed with the same internal light as her eyes. We simply reperceived ourselves as the governing force of the galaxy. In reality, adjusted accordingly. Emergency recall initiated, shouted nextly through the comm. The last thing I saw before the perceptual bridge collapsed was Dr. Vin raising a hand in farewell. Your prototype works, ancestor, better than you could possibly imagine. When you return, tell them, perception is reality. I awoke in our lab, surrounded by the concerned faces of my team and the absolutely terrified mandibles of Director Calvan. You were gone for 17 minutes, said Picaret, scanning me with a medical probe. Your physical form completely disappeared for 12 of those minutes. Then you just reappeared, but your quantum signature was fluctuating wildly. What happened? I sat up slowly, my mind racing with everything I'd seen and learned. The helmet, I noticed, had partially melted, the crystalline matrix now fused into a new configuration. I'm at the future, I said simply. Our future, and it's glorious. Terrifying, but glorious. Over the next hour, I explained everything. The temporal jump, my evolved descendant, the revelation about how our technology would develop. With each detail, I watched my colleagues' expressions shift from disbelief to wonder to a strange mixture of horror and excitement. We didn't just create an alternative to propulsion technology, concluded Zumbar. his tentacles twisted in the pattern that indicated deep thought. We accidentally discovered the foundation for reality manipulation. That can't be possible, insisted Calvan, though his polished carapace was now dulled with stress-induced secretions. Perception cannot actually alter reality, can it? Asked Nexley, already examining the fused remains of the helmet. The quantum observer effect has been established science for millennia. We just never took it to its logical extreme. The Council will never allow us to develop this, Picare said. If what your descendant told you is true, they will try to shut us down the moment they realize what we have discovered. I thought about Drunar's dismissive eye stalks, about centuries of being the cosmic weird neighbor, about being denied a seat at the galactic table. They denied us conventional technology, I said, feeling a smile spread across my face. So we built something far more terrifying, something they can't regulate because they can't even comprehend it. By the time they understand what we have created, it will be too late. Are we really considering this? Asked Calvan, his mandibles clicking rapidly. Development of a technology that apparently leads to us. What? Taking over the galaxy? Not taking over, I corrected. Reperceiving. Changing the fundamental relationship between consciousness and reality. Besides, I added, picking up a fragment of the crystalline matrix that still glowed with that impossible purple light. We have already started. The prototype worked. The perceptual bridge is real. Everything else is just refinement. The Oversight Committee will want a report, said Calvan weakly. Tell them we have had a breakthrough, I suggested. Tell them we have developed something unique to the Vex'Tari, something no council race has ever conceived. Tell them we are about to change everything. As my team began examining the data from my jump, already discussing modifications and improvements, I thought about Dr. Vin's parting words. Perception is reality. The council had denied us technology because they believed us irresponsible, immature, dangerous. And in response, we had accidentally stumbled upon something that proved them absolutely right, that I couldn't wait to see Drunar's eye stalks when they realized what we'd done. 0.6 cycles later, I stood once again before the council chamber, this time flanked by my entire team. Our prototype, now refined into what we called the reality perception engine, was securely contained in a shielded case that Drunar's gelatinous mass quivered with what I chose to interpret as anticipation. The Vex'Tari Science Division has requested this extraordinary session to present an alternative propulsion technology after your previous rejection. Not alternative propulsion, I corrected cheerfully. Alternative perception. We took your advice, Representative Drunar. We focused on developing our own technological solutions rather than seeking shortcuts. And what exactly does this perception technology do? Asked a crystalline being from the upper tiers of the chamber. I exchanged glances with my team before answering. It allows us to redefine our relationship with space-time, to bridge distant points through perceptual alignment rather than physical movement. Murmurs spread through the chamber as council representatives consulted with their advisors. I noticed several of the more technologically advanced species looking distinctly uncomfortable. You appear to be describing a form of teleportation, said Drunar, eye stalks narrowing suspiciously. Not at all, I said with perfect technical accuracy. Teleportation moves matter through space. Our technology adjusts perception of space around consciousness. The physical form follows the perceptual framework. Completely different principles. This sounds highly theoretical, said another representative. Would you like a demonstration? I offered, knowing they would refuse. Council protocols prohibited untested technology in the chamber. As expected, Drunar's mass rippled in alarm. Absolutely not. Any unproven technology must undergo rigorous safety evaluation before. Of course, I interrupted smoothly. We anticipated your concern, which is why we have prepared comprehensive documentation for your scientific advisors. I gestured, and Picare stepped forward with a data crystal. Everything you need to understand our discovery is contained here. What I didn't mention was that our documentation included certain mathematical proofs that, once understood, would plant the seeds of perceptual manipulation in the minds of whoever studied them. Not enough to replicate our technology, but enough to make them question the nature of reality. A little mimetic time bomb, courtesy of Nexley's programming genius. The Vex'Tari request formal recognition of our innovation and unrestricted development rights. I continued. As this technology falls outside all existing council classifications, there are no regulations preventing our continued research. DRUNAR's eye stalks were indeed twitching now, exactly as I'd hoped. The council will need to convene a special committee to evaluate this unusual approach. Until then, all development must cease. I bowed respectfully, suppressing a smile. We understand completely. We would never want to proceed without council approval. Of course, the lab back home was already mass-producing perception engines, and we had begun training select Vex'Tari in their use. By the time the council's committee published their findings, our perception of reality would already be shifting. And reality, as Dr. Venn had shown me, would adjust accordingly. What about our request for standard propulsion technology? Asked Zoombar innocently. Since this new approach might not be approved, DRUNAR's central mass pulsed with what might have been resignation. The council will reconsider your application in light of your species' evident resourcefulness. As we left the chamber, I caught Picaret's eye and saw her cranial ridges flushing with barely contained laughter. They have no idea what's coming, do they? She whispered. None whatsoever, I confirmed. But they denied us conventional technology, so we built something far more terrifying. Soon, they will understand exactly how terrifying it is. And somewhere, 273 cycles in the future, I knew Dr. Zor'Tak Venn was perceiving this moment with approval, in a reality that we were already beginning to shape.